Welcome to Get Your Book Done. I'm your host, Christine Kloser, a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author, award-winning publisher, and book writing coach to thousands. I love helping aspiring nonfiction authors write, publish, and promote their best books. Because there's nothing more powerful than writing a book to transform your life, your readers' lives, your business, and ultimately the world with your message. So let's get started. Welcome to today's episode. I am very excited to be with you here today. We're going to kind of have a deep dive conversation on today's topic about the power of forgiveness with an amazing woman who you'll meet in just a moment. And just in case you're wondering, this is the Get Your Book Done podcast. Why are we talking about the power of forgiveness? And the reason why we're talking about the power of forgiveness is because as an author, as a writer, as someone who's here to express and share and bring your light and your message to the world, you can do that much easier, much more fluidly, with so much more grace and joy and freedom of expression and liberation if you are not holding on to these hurts and experiences from the past, and you've actually moved through the space of forgiveness, both for yourself and for others on your journey, right? Transformational authors, a lot of times we're writing stuff because we have experienced a lot, and not all of it has been wonderful. And the more we can forgive, the freer we are to actually write. And believe me, when you hear from the amazing Jania Aebi today on this conversation, you're going to be so inspired and delighted and have perhaps a whole totally new awareness of forgiveness and its power for you in your life and for you in your expression through your book in this world. So I am very excited. I actually met Jania 5 years ago. We both happened to land. We have a common friend in Ken Stone. Some of you, I think, maybe heard Ken Stone's episode of the podcast months ago, actually. But we both landed at an event with Ken Stone in Fort Collins, Colorado. And Jania was just like this beacon of light and amazingness, and our paths crossed, and here we are 5 years later. We just published her second book through our company called Forgiveness, A Path to Create Miracles. And Jania would know because she's a woman whose childhood, happened in Poland during World War II. And then she later faced, challenges in West Africa's civil wars. She grew up in this, and it very much uniquely prepared her to help so many other people around the world for all the decades she's been doing this work to overcome, their problems, their challenges, their issues, their fears, their confusions. Jania is a gifted energy healer. She's a practitioner. She's a coach. And when you hear from her, you're going to understand why she is the voice of forgiveness. Pretty much that's kind of how I envision you, Jania, is the voice of forgiveness. So welcome, Jania, to today's episode.
My goodness me, what a beautiful introduction. This is amazing. I don't think I measure up to that quite, but thank you anyway. This is absolutely fabulous to be with you and be speaking with you.
Well, you absolutely do measure up in my eyes. So where I want to start, and anyone who knows you, you measure up in their eyes, right? Sometimes it's hard to see ourselves. But where I want to start this conversation, all of the conversations on this podcast, is tell us, where did this spark, this calling to become an author and share your wisdom and your messages begin? Childhood dream? Did it start later in life? What called you to authorship?
Well, actually, authorship, I don't think I've ever been called to that. I don't think of myself as an author, like some people who will definitely say, I want to write books, or I want to build a business, or I want to be an astronaut, or whatever. I never wanted to write books. even though my sister has been asking me to write a biography, which I've already refused to do. And the book came actually from a deep feeling that I have lived through something that was very traumatic and needed an enormous amount of forgiveness. And if I could share that with people to help them with their issues, and it doesn't have to be a huge amount of forgiveness. I mean, any forgiveness for anything is always difficult, always.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can help people with that process of how to go through it and why it is that we're stuck in not forgiving, the world is going to become a much better place. And even more important than that, people themselves will have a much happier life afterwards, which is, after all, what we all want, isn't it? A happier life.
Yes. So your calling wasn't so much to the form of words on the page in books. Your calling was to service. Your calling was for healing, and it took the form of books, which, like I said, we've been blessed. We've published, these 2 amazing books of yours through our company. But so the calling wasn't, because some people know, like, oh, I want to be an author, and they have no idea what they want to write about. They just know they want to be an author. But you, I hear the service, I hear the love, I hear the desire to facilitate healing for others, and then the form I'm going to choose, in addition to the healing work that you do and all of that, this other form I'm going to choose is authorship. So I'm kind of curious, right? Because your background, and some of you listening might feel like you're making a leap like this, but like, you were in the import-export business, right? Largely in West Africa. And here you've written these 2 powerful books. The first one we published for you is Your Infinite Power. This most recent one just came out. You can go over to the show notes and get links to Jania's books, of course. The most recent one is Forgiveness, A Path to Create Miracles, right? These are like self-help, spiritual kind of books. So how did you come to know that your life path was in this spiritual field, coming out of, a whole other professional life in the import-export world? Like, how'd that happen?
Yes, it seems like a dichotomy, doesn't it?
A little bit.
But the thing is, my professional life, I was in Africa, and I was working in an import-export company. And it so happened that my husband got killed in a plane crash. And there were very many unclear incidents about that plane crash. And the outcome was pretty horrific, because people from villages and from the neighboring swamps came with machetes to loot and to take any valuables or money they could find. And when the police finally arrived, only my husband was still alive, so he was taken to a hospital, got in a coma, and I was never even allowed to see him during the 2 days before he died, still in a coma. He never regained consciousness. So that was pretty traumatic.
Yes.
And I had a 13-year-old son at that time also to look after. I had to leave Africa. My everything was gone, because the work permit was in my husband's name. So I had to leave Africa, where I had lived for almost 30 years, within 1 month. So I had no money, because the bank account was frozen, of course. There were legal issues. There were Swiss embassy issues. There were police issues, packing up the house, deciding where to go for a start, I didn't know where to go. I had nothing anywhere. So, and I had to do all that within 1 month.
With a 13-year-old son?
With a 13-year-old son, yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. So it was a time in my life which was very difficult. And I really felt as if I was moving knee-deep through sand, because every step I took was a huge effort, and it never even resolved anything. It was leading to more and more difficulties. And finally, after 28 days or so, a couple of days before my flight out, I just looked around at my half-empty house and thought of all the things that still had to be done. And I knew it was just impossible to get all of that done in the time that was left. Just impossible. And I was also mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted. I wasn't sleeping.
And grieving, right? I mean,
yes.
And grieving.
And grieving. I was absolutely, totally exhausted. My hair was coming out in handfuls. And I had to be there for my son also, because my son adored his father.
Mm.
And I remember I sat down with the thought, I'm just giving up all the struggle to get anything done. I'm okay with whatever happens. I have to get some rest. In 2 days, I have to organize a new life for my son in a country I didn't know. So I just needed more strength. And I said, if God doesn't step in, I will have no money, nothing, none of my belongings, and I'm okay with anything that happens. And I just sat there, and I believe I even slept in my chair for a little while. Yeah. And then what happened? Within an hour or two, a couple of neighbors showed up saying, we thought you could use some help with packing. So I just waved my hand around and said, just pack. Everything is there. Just stick it all in boxes and do it. And later the bank manager arrived with a sheaf of papers to sign and a briefcase full of cash.
Oh my goodness, you're kidding me.
I'm not kidding. I tell you. With him came the police commissioner, who stayed with me for 2 days as escort, if you like, as protection, until he took me to the airport and right into the plane. He didn't leave me for 1 instant. The consul from the embassy came with permits for whatever. A lawyer came with more papers to sign. And a friend arrived to take my son to the movies and to dinner, which was very welcome. And everything was getting done without me having to go anywhere or do anything except sign papers that were put in front of me. I didn't even know what I was signing. They just showed me where to sign, and I signed. And only later, yeah.
No, I just say, I don't know about all of you listening, but I have been covered in waves of goosebumps listening to you share this story. And there's so many threads I want to pull. I want you to continue, but then I'm gonna pull some threads that I want to make sure that you listeners really get. So continue with the story, and then I'll pull some threads out.
Yeah, well, that's the end of the story, basically, because only much later when I was on the spiritual path, did I realize what had actually happened. I had totally surrendered to God without even knowing that was a surrender. I was okay with anything that happened. I said, God, if you don't step in, nothing's going to get done, and I'm okay with that. I'll be fine. I need nothing. I want nothing. I just leave everything in the hands of God. I let go of all control.
I'm curious, what was your faith journey like prior to that? Like, to get to the point where you're like, I let go, right? Like the ultimate surrender. I've got 48 hours. I have all this stuff to do. I'm not doing any of it. I'm going to sleep in my chair. I'll be okay with whatever happens.
Yeah.
Like, what was your spiritual life like prior to that?
Well, prior to that, it was almost non-existent.
Wow.
Yeah, because actually I did have an experience when I was 12 years old. And as you said, I was born in Poland and I lived through World War II. And then at the end of World War II, um, I left Poland. My mother decided we needed to go get out because it was communism coming in and she wouldn't have her children brought up in that kind of environment. So we basically escaped. And funnily enough, in some Swiss lorries that came to Poland with medicines and were going back empty, and actually agreed to take a few people, including us, illegally out of Poland, because by then all the borders were closed. There was no way of getting out. So that's how we went, and we finally landed in a strange barracks. It was an American barracks. Funnily enough, you see synchronicities happen all over the place. When I was 12, I sat in a military barracks in the middle of Germany somewhere, having totally lost my known world, and getting presents and bars of chocolate and toys or whatever from the soldiers that were just coming in to give us whatever they could. And I didn't know any of the stuff that they were bringing in. I'd never seen chocolate in my life. I'd never seen an orange in my life.
Wow.
And one of them just knelt down by the cot I was sitting on and tried speaking to me. And then I suddenly realized that I couldn't even understand what he was saying. I didn't have the language. I didn't know English. And everything just tumbled down on me, and I burst into tears. And for no apparent cause, such a feeling of relief came over me, a release of pressure and a serenity. And all of a sudden, nothing mattered anymore. It didn't matter that I didn't understand. It didn't matter that I didn't know anything. It didn't matter that I was in a place I had no clue how I got there or how I was going to get out. Nothing mattered anymore. That was when I was 12. I remember that very vividly. And the feeling of relief I had after the death of my husband when I slept in my chair was exactly that. It's a total feeling of relief and a release of pressure and just peace. Just peace.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So incredibly powerful. And, here's what I want you to take from this, because as you are writing your books, right? I know, because I've been working with you for 16 years and writing books, thousands of people. And so many authors, they come up against this point where the coaching that I'm giving them is around letting go, surrendering, allowing, not having to figure it all out from their own mental thinking, because it's exhausting and it's not the way to write a really fantastic book. So for those of you who might fall into that category of beating your head up against the wall a little bit when it comes to writing, I invite you to, remember Jania's stories around surrender and the miracles that happened and the freedom that came as a part of it. And if she can do, I don't want this to sound trite at all, but if she can experience that level of surrender, both, after escaping, Poland, and surrendering in that moment before she's leaving the country she'd known for 30 years without her husband, and is a single mother now of her 13-year-old son. If she can surrender and let go and allow in that kind of experience, I have to believe that wherever you may need to surrender and let go and allow with the birthing of your book, let Jania's stories be yes, okay, I can let go of this. I can allow, for this experience. If she can do that, I can do this here, in other areas of your life. So, thank you, Jania, for sharing that amazing story. And, was there any other experience that you had, right? Because this was like the big departure from the life you knew and this whole new world and this, this experience of just complete and total surrender and just miracles and literally knocking on your door within a couple of hours.
Yeah. Yes.
Was there
that is incredible.
Yes. Like this is how it works, right? Like we're always the only ones in the way of just incredible abundance pouring upon us in all forms. So
yeah.
Did anything else, happen that really moved you into the work, that you've been doing now, and for the last several years in terms of the healing work that you're doing and helping other people, experience these kind of releases, if you will, this kind of surrender? Is there anything else?
Well, in terms of the healing, I wasn't I had nothing to do with healing, really. Healing to me was going to hospital and getting rid of something. Yeah. And well, the thing is, after the death of my husband, I really turned to spirituality because I had to learn how to live with the horror of what had happened to him while he was still alive in that plane.
Yes.
And spirituality was the only way to go. So then I really started researching and living my spirituality. And what helped me tremendously was a little book that somebody handed to me for no reason except that they were given it as a very good read, and they didn't know English, so they couldn't read it. And the person said, "You know English, and I know you're having a hard time right now, so maybe that will help you." And the book is called Unveiled Mysteries. Yeah. So I said, "Thank you very much," and I started reading it. And I tell you, I sat down one evening to read it, and at 6:00 in the morning, I had finished the whole book. I read through the whole night. I couldn't put it down. I simply couldn't put it down. And from there, I started really searching out what I could find about spirituality and God and whatever name God goes by in your world. And I did go forward quite a bit, but not enough. In fact, I thought I was doing really well with my spiritual life because I had joined an organization, and I was going to help them to put on seminars, spiritual seminars and all that kind of thing. Every summer, I spent 4 months there, and I thought I was doing really good. But at one point, what happened was and now we're getting into the healing, I got a real problem with my foot. I didn't do anything to it. And it was swelling. A bone in my foot was hurting so much that I could hardly walk. The foot was swelling. The swelling was going right up into my knee. No doctor could do anything about it. They couldn't diagnose it even. They said, "We don't know what it is. We've never seen anything like it." And my leg was like an elephant's leg. I could see the moment if I even touched it, the skin would burst. It was so huge. And it was bright red, verging on violet. It really looked horrible. And the doctor said, "We'll have to amputate." So I wasn't ready for amputation. And since I was already on the spiritual path, I decided to just sit and ask for illumination. That's the only word for it. What can I do to get this healed. And days went by, and I was getting worse and worse, until one evening, sitting there, the image of two shamans, they were healers and shamans that I had not really personally met. I had listened to them on stage talking, and on two different occasions. And the first one was from Hawaii, I think a Hawaiian shaman. And the one thing he said to me, he pointed right at me and said, "You over there, you're a healer." And I looked around to see who he was pointing to, and it was obviously me. So I immediately replied, "No, I'm not. I have nothing to do with healing." And I'm ashamed to say I even laughed because it just seemed so ridiculous. And then he said, I know why you're rejecting it and resisting it so much. And I can tell you," and he did actually. And then he said, "It was my choice whether to honor the path of a healer or to refuse it. I could choose. It was my choice." And so I just said, "No, thank you. It's not for me. I know nothing about it. I'm not even interested, And so I said no, and I promptly forgot all about it. The second time, a couple of years later, I think I was introduced to a healer. And as soon as she looked at me, she said, "You're a healer." And I was quite taken aback. And I said, "No, I have nothing to do with healing." So she said, "That's strange, because I don't usually make a mistake like that, but that's okay." And at that time, I did not even remember that I had been told that before.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sometimes, like as we said in the beginning, so difficult at times to see ourselves, right? To really see ourselves and who we are, and, in our brightest, in our lightest, in our essence, right? Of the truth of who we are. It's like, here you are, you're getting the message over and over and over.
Yeah.
And you finally got it.
Well, I finally got it when I was sitting there with my foot up on a stool and not being able to walk. I finally got it, because those two people, their images just dropped into my head together, and I heard the words, "You are a healer." And so that was the absolute knowing. The penny dropped. I knew that I had been shown my path twice over, and I refused to go on it. And I just knew that this was it, that this what I was called to do, quite regardless of my ability or capability. And this was the reason for my problem. That knowing was so strong, I just simply couldn't ignore it. And what I did is say to God immediately, "If you want me to do this, I will. I will, absolutely. But you have to bring me everything I need, because I don't even know where to start." I don't even know where to start. I just didn't know a thing about it. But it was an absolute firm commitment, such as I had never done before. The feeling of it, I tell you, if you have committed, and I know you must have committed to a lot of things in your life, but if you've never had that feeling, it wasn't the real strong commitment that I did. The feeling, I can't even describe it. There are no words for it.
Powerful.
No words.
Changed everything, right? And I'm sure that kind of, set you up to have the experience I know about, the other experience kind of coming, where it led to you writing this book, Forgiveness, the Path to Create Miracles. You've had quite a journey. So would you talk to us a little bit about forgiveness? This podcast is going to run just a little bit long today. So we'll be wrapped in hopefully maybe the next 5-10 minutes, a little bit longer than usual. But I do feel like it's important that I want to get your perspective, Jania, on forgiveness, the topic of your new book that we just published, and a little bit of the story of how you came to know this power of forgiveness so profoundly.
Well, yes, it happened actually. You talked about this event we were at with Ken Stone.
Yes.
Actually, it happened during that event. It's just the synchronicity of this. I'm only starting to see it now. It's just amazing, because at that event, I was meditating one morning before we started our daily thing, and what came to me out of nowhere, truly out of nowhere, I remembered myself at 9 years old, and I had just finished reading a book about the Teutonic Wars, where a man was tortured in unspeakable ways for years and years during the Teutonic Wars. He had his torturer brought before him, bound hand and foot, to take his revenge at last. And he was given a dagger because he was blind, and he really was in a bad way. And lifting that dagger that was put in his hand, instead he just cut the cords of the prisoner and let him go free. And I remember I was 9 years old, and I had tears in my eyes. And my one deep desire in that moment, I said, what if I could forgive like that? I mean, that was a moment where I still now I remember it, but it hadn't cropped up, that remembrance, for 60 years or so. More than probably 80 years now, because I'm just 88. Isn't that something?
That is something, and I'm going to speak to that in just a moment, but go on. Forgiveness.
Yeah. Forgiveness. In that moment, I wanted to be able to forgive like that. Somebody who had really shot my life to pieces totally, and to be able to just let him go and forgive. It was beyond me, and I just wanted that. And so, in one instant, I saw the reason for that flashback. I simply understood that I myself, together with my son and the man who had murdered him, before we were ever born, we had set up the whole scenario of my son's death, just to fulfill my desire when I was 9 to forgive unimaginable wrongs.
How old was your son when he was murdered?
33.
Okay.
And all those years later, I was in a situation where that desire could be fulfilled.
Decades later. What if I'm doing my math
later.
right? Like 40-something years later, here you are in Fort Collins having this moment of awareness, seeing that 9-year-old girl and that memory. I want to be able to forgive like that, and then seeing the perfection of this situation and the contracts that were made before you incarnated. Yeah,
absolute perfection of the whole situation. So there was nothing to forgive. When I saw that, I had only to choose to do it, and I didn't even have to do it, because I had understood that there was nothing to forgive, because we had set it up, especially for the reason for me to be able to go deeper into forgiveness and into spirituality.
Amazing.
I knew that we had just all agreed to that. My son and that man and me, we had all agreed that they would be the catalysts for my deeper spiritual awakening. And at that moment, I tell you, the gratitude that I felt is just impossible to describe. I understood the divine love that had made a human being act in a criminal way. And I could even see further back to the author of the story, that sparked my desire to become more than I was.
Mm.
You know, it's mind-boggling, the things that happen. I had discovered the gift that was hidden in the tragedy, and I could only be grateful for the opportunity which I had actually asked for, to choose a higher response than anger and grief and incomprehension that I had felt, and most people would feel.
Yes. Yes. Such an incredible story, Jania. This is why, we're kind of going over a few minutes here with today's show, because I just wanted you to get the essence of the story, because all of you listening as transformational authors who are trying to, get your books done and, get your books out there in the world, this ability to forgive. And I get that it's out there. And if you want to learn more about like this level of forgiveness and how profoundly it can free you, as you hear in Jania's voice, then definitely go over to the show notes or go to Amazon and grab her book, Forgiveness, A Path to Create Miracles. But this, this is part of the author's journey. This is part of you freeing yourself, right? Because forgiveness doesn't, yeah, of course it frees the other, but really, like, it's about freeing you.
No, it doesn't free the other. It doesn't free the other at all. You know, I don't know whether that man got his lesson out of it. That's his choice. I know I got my lesson. It freed me. Yeah.
Yes.
As I said in the beginning, it's nothing to do with the other person. Forgiveness has nothing to do with the other people. It's only for yourself. It's to free you.
Yes.
And if it frees the other person, great. But if it doesn't, it's not my responsibility. It's their responsibility to actually take the lesson and learn from it.
So beautifully said. I feel like some of you right now listening need to take a deep breath with what you just heard around forgiveness really freeing you. And maybe you want to look, and maybe it's, your book is bringing something up for you. Maybe there's, a situation happening in your life that's bringing something up for you. But, just take a breath and allow yourself to embrace this concept that this forgiveness is going to free you. And as a result, allow you to experience yourself differently in the world, in every area, aspect of the world, including the expression of your true essence on the pages of your book. So this is why I wanted to talk with Jania today. I wanted you to hear her story. I also wanted any of you who are thinking, oh, it's too late for me. Jania's 88 and she just published her second book, and her first book just came out a couple of years ago. So,
and actually, Christine, I will add one thing to it. I only started on all this at the age of 75.
So there you have it, right? Never too late. Big takeaway I want you to take away from this conversation today. It's never too late. And forgiveness frees you. And if you want to have that deeper experience of forgiveness, like I said, please go and take a look at Jania's book. And if you want to dive deeper into some of this, like these much deeper layers of what it really means to be an author, then I encourage you to also check out thesacredcontainer.com. Again, that's thesacredcontainer.com, because I'm doing my first ever special live 8-week training. That's like all of this deeper foundational work for authors before they actually start the journey of writing the book. It's all going to be happening in the Sacred Container. And again, the first class starts live, I think, October 29th. This is airing on the 9th.
That's exciting.
Yes.
My goodness. Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
I am so excited. I know I can't tell you. I'm so excited. So if you're listening to this when we release it on the 19th, you've got 10 days to go check out the Sacred Container and join me live for this 8-week journey, which is going to set you up for success, not only in authorship, but for you in every aspect of your life as we do this deeper dive together. So anyway, Jania, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Congratulations on, the publishing of your second book at age 88. Like, yay, Jania, you're such an inspiration. And is there any quick, word of wisdom that you want to share as we close up the show here with our authors listening in regards to, their writing journey?
Yeah, well, I think just love yourself exactly as you are in every moment. Just love yourself. And also, that means loving your spirit, since you are one with it. And the love you have just felt, through that love, you are becoming more like your spirit is. Because spirit never judges you. It loves every aspect of you, whatever you may think. And that is the most important thing. Just accept yourself exactly as you are, because God accepts you exactly as you are and loves you as you are.
So beautifully said. Thank you, Jania. And there's nothing quite like, well, there's lots of things, but authorship is certainly one thing that really presses us up against that self-love edge. Can I love myself here? Can I love myself here? Can I love myself here? So such beautiful words to close on today. So thank you, Jania, for being here on the show today. Always amazing to talk with you, and hopefully I'll get to see you in person, sometime in the next few years here, and just give you a hug and celebrate all of your amazingness.
I would so love to give you a hug again. It really would be such a pleasure. But with traveling these days, look at what's happening.
I know. It's going to be a little while, I think, but I'm gonna hold my vision that we get to do that at some point.
Well, I could give you a virtual hug through Zoom. Okay?
Yes. Perfect. And I want to thank all of you for listening, for being here, and for really tapping on that link to listen to an episode of Get Your Book Done on the power of forgiveness. It speaks to where you are, this journey that you're on, the openness of your heart to just be more of who you were born to be, because forgiveness is part of that process of liberation and expression and healing and wholeness and freedom, and all of that helps you write that book from that deepest essence. So I just want to thank you for, clicking to listen to this episode today and for being here. And of course, I look forward to next time that we get to join you on the next podcast episode. And until then, happy writing, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Get Your Book Done. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to everything we talked about today. And if you want my help with your book, head over to ChristineCloser.com to learn more and get a free copy of my book, The Transformation Quadrant, which will show you how to blueprint your book in 15 minutes or less. The Get Your Book Done podcast is where the leading conversation is happening for transformational authors everywhere. And I'm grateful you tuned in.